So hello and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces just on the screen here. So you're all very welcome to, as Michelle said, part one of our two-part interactive workshop, which is all aimed at individuals and businesses who want to create or develop or enhance an experience that is centered around our fantastic food and drink that we have here in Northern Ireland. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gary Quaid and I'm the Food and Drink Experience Development Officer at Tourism NI. So I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon, not only by so many of you who have taken the time to log on to our workshop, but also to our lead facilitator, Tina O'Dwyer. Tina is the founder and director of the tourism space, who comes to us today with a wealth of knowledge right across the tourism spectrum within the island of Ireland and internationally. But Tina has a particular love and interest for all things that are authentic, immersive, and really special about Northern Ireland. So I hope that you all enjoy this initial introduction to food and drink, tourism and experiences, where we really want you to start thinking about some ideas, and you're encouraged to bring those ideas with you to the regional workshops next week. And please, as Michelle said, interact with us, use the chat function, and we can pick those up as we go along and then maybe do a mop-up session towards the end. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Tina and a big thank you to you all for taking the time with us today as we explore the opportunities around the creation of more food and drink experiences that will awaken the giant spirit in our visitors. Over to you, Tina.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks very much, Gary. Thanks, Michelle. Hello, everybody. Really pleased to be with you today. I recognize one or two familiar faces, maybe a few more, and I won't get to know you all really well over the course of this session, but it's great to be able to see the faces and for you to see each other. Yeah, I'm coming from you right now in County Clare. I'm starting to feel like I'm on a TV show. I'm not starting to feel like that on Zoom. I'm in County Clare. Over the last couple of years, I've come to discover Northern Ireland. I must say, came to Northern Ireland for my first time on an invitation from TNI to deliver a workshop, and since then we've brought 2 family holidays there. We were there this summer as well, and I've enjoyed working with quite a lot of businesses around Northern Ireland, and really following with great interest your journey in tourism, which has been quite inspirational and really interesting. And I know Gary and we were originally planning to do this workshop in late March. I think it was one of the 24th, 5th and 6th, those kind of dates, something like that, and we got locked down just before. So we're just getting to pick it up now again virtually and this way. And we were just chatting beforehand as well, and we were saying there's up to 100 people have registered for this workshop today, and which is huge. There's about 70 people on at the moment, and we were saying if we were meeting in person it would be more of a conference than a training workshop, because there's so many people, and it's brilliant to see that kind of interest. So in the spirit of that, I guess, were we in a workshop or in a conference right now, we'd be having tea and coffee and scones and chats and sussing out who we'd sit with and who they were and that kind of thing. And I think please do take seriously what Michelle and Gary said there about interacting in the chat. It's what we have available to us right now. In the meantime, it's like the whisper to your neighbor during a conference about something. If something occurs to you, if you have a comment, if you have a suggestion or a question, please do use the chat. I'm going to bring you through the agenda, but we're going to be stopping regularly throughout this in order to hear from people. And sometimes, you know, you think of something when I'm saying it, and 10 minutes later the Q&A comes and you can't remember what it was. So do put something in the chat. And if somebody else puts a comment or a suggestion in the chat, and it's what you would have liked to ask or you'd like to know, please do kind of say yes, you know, yes to that, or yeah, I'd like to know that as well, because it will help Michelle and I know, you know, what are the questions people really want to hear more about as well. So I'd encourage you to do that. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is do get engaged in it. This is the way we're set up. It's very much, I suppose, while there'll be interaction, a lot of it is coming from my direction. Think about this, step into the mindset of food and drink tourism, and everything I'm saying, question it in relation to yourself, in relation to your micro destination, whatever part of Northern Ireland you're in, and also in relation to Northern Ireland as a whole. So there's food and drink is obviously, it's a very emotive, it's a very organic type of thing, and it is about shaping it to what Northern Ireland wants to say about itself, to what your micro destinations want to say about themselves, and what you as an experience provider might want to say. So I would say make it your workshop by chatting, by asking questions, by making notes, by challenging yourself by anything. Is that true? Is that true for me? Would that work? Is that a load of nonsense? All of those are valid questions, but do get thinking about it. I think this is the start of a journey in terms of T&I working with the industry in developing food and drink experiences. So it isn't a once-off. We're back next week for certain. We have dates next week. I'll show those to you at the end, but I expect you'll have more interaction with each other over the time as well. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have been involved in tourism maybe 10 or 12 years now. I accidentally fell into it when I moved to North Clare. It's a very touristy area. I didn't even know tourism was an industry at the time, and I had a part-time contract I got after returning from maternity leave to get me out of the house, and it happened to be the coordination of a tourism network, an ecotourism network, and I was involved in that project on and off with various kind of funded projects for 5 or 6 years. And one of the things, it was about sustainable tourism and ecotourism. And I could tell you lots of stories about it, but one of the things was we found that made people yawn at the time was the whole idea of ecotourism and sustainable tourism. And it was a hard thing to talk about and a hard thing for people to listen to without everyone switching off. And we kind of realized that one of the things we needed to do was tell this story in a different way. We needed to make ecotourism and sustainable tourism more meaningful to people. The other thing was it was the Burren region of County Clare, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Burren, but it's, I probably should have put up some pictures there, but it's the karst rocky landscape, very rocky karst landscape, has an amazing story of botany, geology, archaeology, all of this kind of stuff. But as a holiday destination, and tourism was what we were in, it had very little recognition at all. It had this, everyone in the Burren thought, you know, it's unique, it's special, we're renowned the world over, but actually very few people would have thought of going there on their holidays. They'd have thought about their geography school trip. They'd have thought about driving through on the way from Galway to Killarney. They didn't think anybody lived there, much less eat there, produce food there, have a restaurant there. So we realized to get the Burren out to people, we also needed to stop telling the story, or at least create a new story alongside the geology and the botany and the archaeology, of the fun and the people and the holiday you might have in this place as well. And we hit on the idea of a food trail, the Burren Food Trail, as a literally, and I have meetings where we said, like, this is how we will tell the story of sustainability. This is how we will tell the story of the Burren in a new way and in a fresh way. This is the new book we're writing. And that's how I got into food tourism at the time. Again, didn't know that was a term either. It was just something we had internally come about. And we had a wonderful 3 or 4 years of starting from, there were a bit like here, a lot of wonderful food producers, restaurateurs, farmers, artisans in the area. They had no connection with each other. Some of them were national level figures in the food scene. And again, they hadn't any kind of sense of connection. And as a result, there was no story about the place. There was nothing that people from outside could see. So our job was just to bring people together, to say, how can we tell this story? What will we do? And then we ran with it from here. So I would say similar to where you are, where we are today, it's like, we know we've got great food, we've got great produce, got great restaurants, got great energy, got great ideas. How do we bring that out? How do we get that out to people? The food trail, the Burren Food Trail, went on to become, within 3 years from literally, I would think the Burren would be the last place in Ireland anyone thought would have connected with a food story. But in 2015, that was early 2013, late 2012, early 2013. In 2015, we very proudly won the Foodie Destination of Ireland 2015, but that year we also won a European award, European Destination of Excellence for tourism and local gastronomy. And the following year, the region and the food trail very much as part of that, the National Geographic World Heritage Award, World Legacy Award, actually. So we created huge momentum, and my job was to coordinate and to make the food experience a tourism experience, and the drink experience a tourism experience, and to bring the story together collectively. And then after that, I kind of got invited to speak and deliver workshops and this kind of stuff on tourism. And I felt, and I'm sure some of you will feel it today, like that old imposter syndrome, like, what, me? I don't know anything about food, don't know anything about drink, never grown anything. I've learned a certain amount about this, but as a result I accepted the invitations and I ended up doing a lot of study. And since 2015 I've worked with a lot of destinations and groups on the area of food and drink tourism linked to sustainability, and on basically how to make a go of it, But I did think, I remember the first time being asked about that, going, yeah, that was good for the burn because we had that particular issue, but is food tourism really a thing? Is drink tourism really a thing? Is this all not a bit of talking ourselves up into, you know, making a thing where there isn't really a thing? Isn't it just tourism? And I was very skeptical. And I was also very insecure about myself and what we had to tell and what the story was. And my experience since then is that that's the way most people are about food and drink tourism, and kind of going, is it really, or is this just keeping somebody busy, making up, keeping Gary busy and all of that? So what I've discovered is that it is a real thing, and we're going to talk through quite a lot of that today. I've gotten over my imposter syndrome, so I'm going to encourage anybody here who's feeling it to get over that as well. It's very much something that's in flux right now, not least because of COVID-19. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. I did notice when you registered for the workshop, some of you had put in various questions about different things. I will flag at the moment, we're not going to be speaking particularly about food regulations, food health and safety, or particularly about COVID, other than that's a context we're in right now. Just to let you know, we're very much going in straight into the area of food and drink tourism and the experience side of things. So I just want to let you know that. So you saw there a picture of strawberries, and that's to remind me of a moment when I did realize the food and drink tourism was a thing for myself personally, apart from me researching it. And I'm just going to share a story to invite you to think yourself, do you have any really strong food and drink memories from when you were on holidays? And what are they, and who are they with, and what made them special? Because if you have that memory, you had an experience of some sort or other that reminded you of the place. One that springs to mind in my family is about strawberries from California. I was born in California. My family used to live there. We go back every so often. We have family there that we stay with. And we had a nice holiday a couple of years ago. And when it comes up in conversation around the dinner table, my children will always say, God, do you remember the strawberries, Mom? Do you remember the strawberries? Now, they did lots of things in California. The strawberries would not be something that was top of my mind. It's always top of their mind. And what happened was we were at a motel, we were sitting around the pool. Another family that were there, an older couple, came back and they had 3 big punnets of strawberries. And they offered us one where we were at and they gave it to us and we ate them. And they were definitely the most delicious strawberries I think I've ever eaten. They were so, and now I don't know if it was the strawberries, if it was the sun, if it was the pool, if it was just the atmosphere, I don't know what, but in taking the strawberries and having them, we got chatting with these people who started to tell us they'd been to a strawberry farm down the road. That's where they got them. That's why they had so many. They really loved the farmer. They bought way more than they wanted to, but that's why they were sharing them. And we got in a conversation about strawberries and strawberry farming in California. And it turns out that, little did I know, 88% of the US strawberries are grown in California on just 1% of the land of California. So that was interesting. I don't know if that's true, but I quote it as true because that's what they told me, but it's something around that. And then they told me Trump was newly elected at the time, and there was all the story about, you know, not letting the migrant workers come to the States anymore and cracking down on that. And they said that's a huge issue because in California, it's different from here. You see these huge fields and you see all these bodies crouched down and they're picking the fruit. And they're mainly Hispanic people, and many of them are undocumented and on low wages. And this particular couple felt really strongly that Trump's policy was a disaster for farmers in California, but also for families and workers of these people who had immigrated into the United States. And then there was a big conversation about the drought in California. We give out about the rain. They'd had about 5 years drought at that time. The whole place is brown and yellow and, you know, burnt looking compared to here, and the effect that was having. They're using way more chemicals, and that's having all this extra effect on the food, etc., etc., etc. So here I am telling you this story because what it is, the strawberries, that one interaction gave us so much story about California that I didn't get from Disney or Universal Studios. That was like literally about the politics, the people, the place, the people who live there, how they eat, how the strawberry history. I'm not boring you with that now, but it's that idea, and I want you to take it for the rest of the call, which is sense of place. If I was to have that interaction in Northern Ireland, if somebody gave me a piece of Northern Irish food and I asked about that, what are the stories behind it? We're going to come back to that again and again. What does it tell me about Northern Ireland? What does it tell me about your history, your culture, the way you live? And when you're thinking about an experience, I'd like you, again, think back to the strawberries. I'd like you to think, well, what are we sharing in what we say. That couple were not tourism people. They were just telling their story. It's to highlight that food and drink is different to almost any other tourism product because it's about the senses, because we taste it, we touch it, we see it, we feel it. When I see those now, my mouth waters again, you know, and it's like, I don't know if it does for you, but I remember that couple, and I remember the story of politics in the United States and how that related to the strawberries. So it's the same thing for you. Like what it's different to having, you know, to seeing something or visiting an attraction or reading a history. It's actually engages all 5 or 6 of our senses. And it's why it's becoming the biggest growing sector of tourism worldwide, or it certainly was. I know we're speaking about a moment now when tourism is not, you know, at a bit of a standstill, but be that as it may, let's work on the assumption that we will be back again. The role and contribution of food and drink tourism is the first thing on our agenda. The motivations and expectations of visitors in pursuit of food and drink experiences, immersive and participatory food and drink experiences, and collaboration. So the role and contribution of food and drink experiences, that's what we're looking at now. So the sectors of tourism, there are 4, broadly speaking, sectors of tourism: accommodation, transport, food and beverage, and entertainment. At a rough guess, you probably know this instinctively, 33% of the spend is on food and beverages. And that just makes sense to an extent, because you have to eat. You have to eat when you're away from home, so you're probably purchasing quite a lot, either even if you're self-catering, you're purchasing, but food and beverage accounts for 33%. And it's what makes it so important, because it's a certainty that people are going to spend on food and drink. That alone is not the opportunity, I guess, but the value of food and drink in Northern Ireland, for example, is 33% approximately worldwide, because that's just the nature of it. If we say total expenditure in Northern Ireland of 968 million, about 350 million is spent on food and drink. So that's the scale of the spend, therefore the scale of the opportunity, because that's just within tourism in particular. Northern Ireland has been on a journey with it. 2016 was a year of food and drink in Northern Ireland. I know here from ROI looking upwards at that time, we were kind of saying, you know, we should have done that. They've gone ahead and done that. And it was really quite a thing. I think that made an impact, a real impact for Northern Ireland. And that was obviously evidenced in 2018 with Northern Ireland winning the best food destination. 2019 saw the launch of your experience brand, Embrace a Giant Spirit, which you're going to hear about today, and Taste the Island, which was an all island initiative. Fáilte Ireland, Tourism NI and Tourism Ireland, which started, was a 3-year initiative, was very exciting, really about really blasting the island out there in international terms to tell the great, and literally, you know, in the last 20-25 years, really strong, solid story of food and drink. That has been interrupted by COVID-19, and we're now obviously in that response stage. A lot of the imagery and the material that went with that was about people, you know, being together and at events and stuff. So it's very off message for right now. But we will, it's still, as you'll see as we go through here, it's still an opportunity and maybe pivoting to shape that. So what is it? How do you define food and drink tourism? I'm going to use the definition from the World Food Travel Association here, which is the act of traveling for a taste of place in order to get a sense of place, which is one definition for it. I don't know in terms of what you think of that, or is that the way you would define it? I am going to ask you, though, to think about that in terms of, I've mentioned sense of place already. I've given you the example of California, and I want you to get thinking now, what is the sense of place of Northern Ireland that food and drink can give you? And it's just a question, I suppose, from your head. And what is it you think visitors already think about food and drink when, you know, when it comes to that? Part of the Taste the Island initiative was due to the realization that most of our visitors, even local, even our domestic visitors, don't have a full appreciation of how good the food and drink story is, how good the experiences are, and it was to address that. So I'm going to ask you to do something which I'll stop talking for a minute. I'm going to ask you to take out your phone or there on your computer to open this website, menti.com, menti.com, and you'll be asked for a code when you do that. The code is 7603118, 7603118. I'm going to ask you a couple, just bear with me, you'll be wondering what I'm at, bear with me. It's a little survey to get a sense of where your thoughts are on this right now, and it'll work really simply. So if you can open that with the code 7603118, and you will then be asked, I'm just gonna, Have you got that? You'll be asked one set of questions, you'll be asked to put in your answers. If you could do that, and then it's probably going to say to you when you've done it, wait for the person to ask you the next question. I'll ask you that in a little while, so it's not going to come straight away. But I want to show you, I'm going to share my screen to a new screen now. So what do you think visitors think of when they think of Northern Irish food and drink? This is your view of what others might think, visitors to Northern Ireland think. So you're getting a sense, keep voting if you're still there. You're getting this.
Can we have the code again, please?
7603118. 7603118.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for reminding. So you're seeing different things come through there. Quality, local, seem fairly constant. They must be getting a lot of top threes. Traditional, whiskey, potatoes, fresh. And then kind of, John's iPhone is scribbling on our picture. If you could, I don't know how that's happening. We're seeing then around the edges, people bringing up ideas like crafted, boring, soda bread, unexciting, breakfast, breads, crafted, fish and chips, great pubs and beer, whiskey and spirits, foraged, tray bakes, fish and chips coming up quite a lot, fish, better than I thought, crack is making it in there, people, sense of story. So it's growing up there. It's interesting. It's interesting to know what you think others think. Quality, local, traditional, potatoes, fresh, delicious. What the research is telling us, you can get that shared with you later. What the research is telling us is that, and Gary, you might speak on this, is that the one they're more likely to put up, and I don't mean to offend anyone, is fish and chips or something like that. It tends to get associated with Ireland, here in the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland. It's the image of people have of England, which is fish and chips, or brown sauce, or roast beef and Yorkshire puddings, that type of idea. There's actually very little awareness of how fresh, how high quality, how local it is. And it's what we think that people think, but it's not actually what the research is showing us that people think. The things you're putting up there that people think are actually, though, what they're looking for. They're looking for it, and that's why Taste the Island was such an important thing, that we know what people are looking for internationally. Ireland has to offer, but yet their reputation isn't there and the visibility isn't there. I think when you look at that mind map that we just created there together, that is actually what we want people to think. That's the best of our story, and that's what we want them to think. The words fish and chips, boring, uneventful, better than I thought, those small words that were coming up around the edge, whoever put those in, that's actually what shows up when these kind of mind maps are done with visitors. So we need to be aware of that. It means you cannot assume that anybody knows your experience is any good. In fact, quite a lot of them could be thinking, are they mad doing a tour on food, food, and, you know, what are they going to be talking about? So that's the first thing to bear in mind for your messaging as well. It's just, I suppose, a little dose of reality for us sometimes. It's a bit like the Burn. We thought everyone in the world knew us, you know. I used to go to workshops and I'd say, you know, I'm representing 40 businesses in the Burn, and they nearly fall off their chair going, what, do like even 40 people live in the Burn? They didn't realize it. So assume nobody knows how good you are. That's the first thing to remember. I don't particularly like the World Food Travel Association definition, because it says it's as if people travel expressly for food and drink, you know, the act of traveling to have an experience. I prefer this one, which is any experience in which one learns about, appreciates, or consumes food and drink that reflects the local, regional, or national cuisine, heritage, and culture. So it's not just food for fuel, it's not just eating, it's one that really connects you to the place. It's all about the delivery of world-class food and drink experiences so that visitors to Northern Ireland encounter local food and drinks that are seen as authentic products that symbolize the place and its culture. That's really important. That's what we're talking about here, not just eating and drinking, because we have to eat and drink, but something that's elevated to the level of an experience. And keeping in mind what I said there at the beginning, the sense of place. What is it that gives you a sense of place? This is why they're so important. Food and drinks have an unmatched ability to communicate a unique sense of place. Local gastronomy provides a direct connection to the history of a region, the soul of its people, and the rhythm of daily life. And it's a lovely sentence that somebody crafted, but it's truly what it's about. And again, I'm asking you to question yourself, what in my interaction with you, your experience or the experience you're imagining, some of you don't have one yet and you're thinking about it, what is it that lets people in, gives them the window of Northern Ireland? And like my California example, I learned a lot about, you know, life in California that I didn't understand by being the traditional type tourist, just from that conversation. And there was no effort in that conversation. It was just the way it is. Food is a means for us to connect. We chat over food, we chat over drinks, we get to meet locals, we get to meet our guide, and we just want the simple stuff. So the second lesson I would say when you're thinking about this, nobody knows how special you are, but the special thing is simplicity. We don't need to overthink food and drink tourism. That's one of the things, and one of the things I find is people try really hard to develop something brilliant. Think first about what's simple and authentic and actually reflective of Northern Ireland. There are a number of benefits to the destination from being involved in food and drink, and I think this is, you know, TNI's motivation for it on a macro level. More local food and drink businesses get commercial value from tourism. That's the bottom line, that more visitors come to Northern Ireland, more visitors stay longer in Northern Ireland, they spend more while they're there, and they're more likely to refer than they would have done before. One of the things that's really stepped up, it was always important, word of mouth, it's more important, it seems, as a result of COVID, that recommendation and that referral. So we want people to go away with brilliant memories. Increased spend with local producers, that's one of the reasons. Help producers diversify and have another income stream. Visitors to get an enhanced experience in the area, stay longer, and encourage referrals. So apart from the destination and the, you know, the greater good as such from tourism, business benefits can be substantial. The potential to diversify and excel in tourism, broaden the offering, balance out the risk a little bit. We've seen how important that is now. Creating new immersive food and drink experiences, collaborating with others in tourism to promote your produce, and meeting and networking with other producers. The question, I suppose, is, we're going to take a break now in a second, and we'll go on to, you know, the actual experience and how you can bring that about. But the question for yourself again is a little self-check. How well do you right now, or could you in the future, create a sense of place? How can you or could you enhance the overall visit to Northern Ireland? How can you encourage a longer stay, higher spend, and generate referrals? Now, we don't have time in this call for us to stop and answer all of those, but I would encourage you to jot a few notes for yourself, or to take them away as questions. Not because I want to know it, or not because Gary wants to know it, although I'm sure he does, but and he and I do as well, but because these are actually, as we'll go through motivations for visitors, these are things that will actually delight your visitor as well and help you shape your experience. Back to the motivations of visitors. So it's what we've covered so far is kind of the big opportunity. Are visitors really looking for this? So for this part, I just want you to step into the shoe of the visitor, particularly the visitor who may not know much about your story already. What is it they're thinking? What are they looking for? If you were standing in their shoes, what would appeal? So Irish experiences that appeal the most. You may have seen this already before, but would anyone even shout out what they think the research would tell us visitors want from Ireland? Now, this is Island of Ireland research that came out, so maybe 3 years ago, and it's probably the most recent Irish specific research we have. Anyone give a shout out as to what it might be? I know the answers. Okay, it might be in the chat. I'm going to say, first off, visiting a local producer or processor is the #1 thing that people would like to do in terms of an experience. Visiting a whiskey distillery or microbrewery, and I think perhaps to an extent the question was put that way, but I think that would also include, in the time since, we've seen a lot of more activity in the areas of spirit distilleries, cideries, orchards. Everything related to drink has become really, really big. And when I say food tourism, if I ever do that during this session, I do mean food and drink tourism. But that visiting this drink side of things is become a really big thing, and it was #2 even a few years ago. Going on an urban walking food tour, attending a food festival or event, following a food trail, foraging with an expert, and attending a cookery school. Those were the top 7. I think there's more down along as well. It's interesting that restaurant doesn't come into what people expected, again, when they think of Ireland, and in terms of an experience. So turning your dining experience into a food tourism experience is kind of a slight nuance, but it's important as well. The thing about this is, visiting a local producer or processor is what people like to do. It's actually very difficult for a visitor to do that to Ireland, because not a lot of them are open or accessible, or for health and safety reasons, able really to visit it. And there seems to be an opportunity for us in general in that. Going on an urban walking tour is top of the list in lots of places, not specifically Ireland. Again, we have some brilliant ones. You have them there in Northern Ireland. We don't have enough of them for what visitors would like to be doing either. Our events and festivals are down a little bit, so they're there for when we come back again, but they're high, and they're always high. They're great hooks to bring people to your destination. Following a food trail, again, we've realized we have quite a few trails in Ireland. I mentioned one already. We've very few that a visitor could follow by themselves, or that are actually followable even with a guide. You know, we call them trails, they're connected together, but there's an opportunity as well to advance on that. So that's interesting. That's what visitors are telling us. This is the really interesting slide, and I think this was from the World Food Travel Association, who did some, again, Ireland-specific research along with other countries. But we see largely around the world tourists, this is from a few years ago, separating into these 3 categories: culinary tourists, food as fuel tourists, and leisure tourists. Broadly speaking, 80% leisure tourists. So 10% are the real food motivated tourists, people who go for the food, who might travel to a city for the restaurant, that's why they're there, or for the chef, or for the particular experience. Then there's the other end of the spectrum, people who just want to eat, you know, just to feed themselves, just to be fed, and they don't have any more regard for it than that. And then leisure tourists, which is 80% of the market, but this is the part for which the interest in food and drink experiences has skyrocketed in recent years. So food tourism went from being, you know, niche in the culinary zone there, the 10%, to actually really becoming a high motivator for the mainstream leisure tourist. And that's what makes it commercially viable and of great interest to tourism bodies, not just in Northern Ireland, right around the world. Food tourism is hot everywhere, because it gives that sense of place, but because people are now really spending on this particular area. And that's referred to as the mainstreaming of food tourism, food and drink tourism. It would have been niche, I would say, even 8 years ago, even in those particular times. It has become very much one of these buzzy, hot topic areas right around the world in terms of tourism, and it's important to kind of be at the races with it. Here's further research from I think it was Canadian as well, a Canadian company who did this. 50% of global travelers say food and drink is more important now than it was 5 years ago. I think it's more than that since then. 64% of consumers are interested in where their food comes from. 93% of visitors to Ireland took part in a food or drink experience outside of just eating or drinking. And food and drink experience is quite wide. There's a whole chain on that. I was at the World Food Travel Association National Conference this time last year, and their survey was showing that 98% of people would regard food in their top 4, you know, motivators or satisfaction factors on holidays, food and drinks. So it's just huge. It's absolutely mainstream. It's top of the list with people. When I first started doing these workshops on food and drink tourism, they were very different to what they are now, but we would have said at that time, 2016, 2017, that these were the things that the food motivated tourist was looking for. Local, hyper-local, provenance and terroir were the big words of the time. Connection to people, that ability to connect to local people via food and drink, it's a very easy way to connect with people, other visitors, with your family, but most importantly with the locals. Getting an immersion into a place like a city food tour will really get you under the skin of the city within the first 2 hours of you being there, if that's the first thing you do. People do feel very immersed through it, and social, that it's a highly social, both in terms of one-to-one interaction with people, but on social media. If you remember, a few years ago, we would have been saying, God, does everyone have to take a photo of their meal and put it on Facebook or put it on Twitter? That's where we were. It was when this idea of, here, I'm at this restaurant checking in, where we became a bit boastful about our food, and we became a bit, I know so much about food. There was an element of the cynics amongst us. We're all going, oh, for God's sake, you know, and stop taking photos of your food. But food and drink tourism is just gold for social media, and social media, as we know, is just huge. So those were the things from I'd say 4 years ago. I took this slide from one I did 4 years ago. I would say what's in people's minds now. What are you thinking about? People are thinking when they think food and drink tourism now. We've evolved in terms of the food and drink experience, and obviously 2020 has, you know, really shifted things for us in so many different ways. But some of the things that are evident to us now and that are coming up alongside all those things on the other slide, they're still important. Sustainability and regeneration is just, when COVID-19 came down, came in on top of us, there was a little bit of, well, all that talk of sustainability now, that's just not going to be the thing, it's about survival. But what we're actually realizing is sustainability is standing strong as a theme, and is for people, for society, in terms of our attitudes and outlooks, and looks set to continue that way as well. If anything, it has amplified people's feelings on that, you know, and it's almost like sustainability is a bit yesterday now. It's about regeneration, and I expect we'll hear a lot more about regeneration in tourism in the future. But also regenerative agriculture was where the regenerative word and concept really has taken a foothold before COVID. It's obviously connected to food, and I think this idea of regeneration is going to be significant as you move forward in the idea of your experience. There's a fear of losing our food cultures. This isn't necessarily COVID related. This is what was happening pre-COVID. We were in this, you know, there was talk of over tourism and the negative effects of tourism and all of that. But one of the big things was a fear of losing our food cultures through globalization, through the McDonald's phenomenon, through too many people traveling and the easy way out, and our local people not able to really compete. So there is a genuine fear of that, of losing our cultures. Rural open spaces have become more attractive, particularly because of what's happened this year. We're seeing that across behavior right now, but it is anywhere you read about people who are looking into the future on this, that's going to become something very attractive and remain something very attractive. Connection is just amplified 1,000% for us now, because we have been isolated, we have been restricted, we have been kept away from people. We're not just, you know, our nearest and dearest we've been kept away from, but even those chance interactions you would have had before, we're going to be ways to come around that and to make that happen in the future. Not just local, but micro, like really micro. The local idea appears to be embedding as a belief for us, and simplicity. The simplicity of one of the upsides of COVID that we hear people speaking about, and it's emerging in the research that's coming out, and the research is all very early, to be honest, so I'm not saying any of this isn't subject to change, is that one of the upsides is the simpler, slower is actually nicer, and we're quite appreciating that part of it, and we expect that to continue through to the food and drink experience. None of us have a crystal ball. So everything I'm putting in this is a caveat, and as we say, we would be hard pushed to predict to the end of next week, really, and to Christmas. But really looking forward into this, these are kind of trends that were evolving pre-COVID that have been accelerated by COVID. More people caring about the planet, that's being really important. A rise of conscious consumerism. Regenerative economy is the future. Local hosting communities being a major part of tourism. So there's a bit of a kickback we're starting to see the signs of a kickback to the mass tourism and the corporates benefiting to much more communities and local hosting. Food and drink central to connection. How we can make that happen, that's an avenue in which we can do that. Collaboration and the pivot and innovation phenomenon. Because we've had to pivot, we've seen enormous innovation in all sectors over the last 6 months or so. We can expect that to have to continue over a period of time. Innovation is not something we're actually quite comfortable with, because it's change, and we prefer the status quo to change. That's why we don't actually see a lot of innovation, but we've seen a huge amount in the last 6 months. Even if you think just in terms of food and drink and the whole, you know, neighbor food and connection with people and takeaway service and local ingredients, all of that kind of stuff. I think we're in a moment where you as individuals and you as businesses have literally any new idea could take hold right now. Any innovative thing you bring is something people are looking for, and to really think about the need to constantly bring that out in a new way. Other trends that the World Food Travel Association is kind of indicating is health, safety and reassurance are paramount. That won't surprise any of you to hear that. A few of you had questions when you registered, you know, how do we still deliver an experience with these type of restrictions? I would say from that point of view, treat it as no different to any other experience, other than you cannot reassure people enough about the steps you have taken in terms of health and safety, about how you have put thought into keeping them safe and welcome and still an enjoyable experience, how you can, through things like the accreditation on the Good to Go thing from TNI, all of those things are in your messaging front and foremost, and also, you know, I have to come across when people are with you and be carried through. Greater respect for local cultures and cuisines. These are kind of the prediction in terms of trends as well. Contactless and takeout more and more is the important thing. Online, everything online. And online includes virtual experiences. I'm going to show you something on that in a little while. Accessible, looking after the differently abled is going to be a major theme. Address weaknesses by pivoting. So if you feel you have a weakness in your business, now's the chance to address it, to actually bring it up as an advantage. Newer, smaller players have more opportunity than ever before. And I think the point that was made there about the hotel looking for people to deal with and to deal with smaller groups, that is just loud and strong. That's where the opportunity is. And it's an opportunity that was not easy to catch on to before. So it is one that's there right now. And there's less growth in the high end. We're seeing, I was speaking to somebody from the bank this morning, and, you know, people are hanging on to their cash when they have it. The high end and the luxury is not as big as it might have been a year ago. It's much more in the simplicity and the value. So those are the key terms. I'm going to ask you to go back to your Menti if you still have it open. And we have another question there on that. So if you don't, you can key it again with this number. But if you do have it open, I'd ask you to go back and try your next question, because bearing in mind, we've kind of indicated, I feel, some things there that I'm just finding, sorry, that would indicate that you have an opportunity right now, that Northern Ireland, what you put in there in your mind map, is actually something that that you can respond to really well. The things you were identifying in your mind map are things that visitors are looking for, and the trends seem to be moving in that direction as well. You should be seeing a new question there, which is what are Northern Ireland's 3 biggest advantages when it comes to food and drink tourism, bearing in mind the kind of trends and opportunities that we've seen there. Quality coming up as the one people are mentioning the most, which is brilliant, because it means you're proud of what you have to offer and you feel you can stand over that as a group. Quality seems to be number 1 there. People and local produce number 2 as really big topics that are coming up there. Local produce, quality and people are really strong. And what's interesting about that is you're looking at those now just off the cuff in a quick question. If that's consistently across your group, like I say, I think and variety, you're onto something there that you can carry with conviction across all of Northern Ireland and across what sector you're in. We listed 6 or 7 sectors there at the beginning on your poll, and still 40% were involved in something else. So there's a whole lot of sectors. We're seeing, I'm just going to call them out: quality, local produce, people, homemade, which is big for you, it seems, variety, passion, provenance, authenticity, green image. Proximity has come up by a few people, and I'm wondering what that means. I'm going to invite anybody who said that when I break from the screen to share what you mean by that. Proximity, just for everybody to have it. Authenticity, freshness, artisan. So you're seeing the core of a really lovely story that you have some kind of sense of unison on. The smaller things there that are harder to read, but I see quite a lot coming in there. Award winning, people have given it in different ways, but award winning is coming across. Uniqueness, heritage, personality, bit of crack, produce locally, locally produced, local producers. Lots about local producers there, just the words aren't exactly the same. Passionate coming in, warm hospitality, story behind the produce, unique stories. Lots of people mentioning stories, and we're going to talk about storytelling because that is really important in food tourism. Participatory, value for money, not yet developed. small providers, passion. So I think island variety, small production, scenic countryside is coming in there, stories, farming, unique, safe, traditional, friendly service, lots of things coming in there the same. So when you see that there and you're looking at that, I suppose not everyone will answer this, but how does it make you feel? How does it make you feel that you have that on this call in this room, that you feel strongly about those things, and about telling the story? I mentioned earlier that we have Tracy Jeffries from Tracy's Farmhouse Kitchen near Strangford Lough on the call. Tracy, I'd love to invite you to join us now as well. She's kindly offered to just share her experience, the journey she's travelled with it. I have some questions I want to ask Tracy, but again, feel free for you to ask them. We'll probably have about 10-15 minutes with Tracy, and we will have chance for questions, but bring them in between as well. So Tracy, you might as well just come on and tell us what is Tracy's Farmhouse Kitchen and what inspired you to get involved in offering, I'm going to give the game away, a bread making experience at home. Tracy.
Okay, thanks Tina for asking me to come on today. So Tracy's Farmhouse Kitchen is an immersive experience where guests and groups of visitors or individuals come to my home, and they basically enjoy local food and drink, and they roll up their sleeves and they make their own soda bread, wheaten bread and potato bread. And after all of that is finished, then we sit down around the table or on various different tables as it currently stands and enjoy the breads that we have made. Thanks, Wendy. The breads that we have made, along with a few other local treats such as tray bakes and my homemade foods and so on. And then they take away a bag with their breads and the recipes with them. So it's very much an immersive activity. It lasts for about between 2.5 and 3 hours. And I'm located just half an hour near to Belfast in Killinchy. What inspired me? So in 2016, I launched Northern Ireland Food Tours, or NI Food Tours. And that was in response. I had actually started out as a producer myself, of all things, of macarons, believe it or not. And I had gone to do the farmers markets and so on. And I remember thinking, gosh, what amazing producers and food and drink offering we have here in County Down. So I set up the food tours at that stage in 2016. And I always love begging and cooking, and I always love meeting people. And I just thought I'm going to marry the two. So really my home is, if you like, a first stop tour on the tour where they will meet the different producers, hear their story, taste their amazing award-winning food and drink. And then it's kind of just taken off from that really on its own.
Brilliant. And who have you been hosting, Tracy? You know, the thing there, is it tour groups? Is it small private groups, independents? How's it going?
Okay. Yeah. So Tina, I have been really, to be honest, I really was launched at the kind of the international end of things. So to be totally honest, I would say about 90% of my business would have been through tour operators and destination management companies. So it would all have been Americans, Canadians, Europeans coming into Northern Ireland. And I worked very closely with Tourism Northern Ireland to get that up and running. So obviously then when all of this hit in March, I literally, I had nothing really, because I really had put my eggs in that basket, you know.
And have you managed to kind of replace that, to pivot, to use the word we all don't like using anymore, but how has it been since? Because obviously the bottom fell out of it for you then.
We totally fell out of it completely. What I would say is that I suppose I didn't really start doing anything. I realized that I had to really turn it around and work on the Northern Ireland ROI GB market. Again, I would have to say I did that very closely with Tourism NI, because I'm not great at social media, and trying to do it on my own would never have worked. But I would honestly have to say I've been quite surprised that I'm doing quite a lot now locally. And the other thing is due to COVID, again, one positive that has come out of it is that my sessions now are half the numbers that I would normally have taken. They are definitely more intimate. I actually love taking that size of a group because it's more enjoyable for me as well, and it just makes for a more relaxed experience all round. So it has actually been quite a good thing in that respect.
Is that commercially viable for you, Tracy? You don't have to give us away your prices now, but smaller groups obviously will pay a bit more because they have private experience, etc. Is it, commercially viable to work with that group?
Yeah, I would have to say probably the fact that I am such a small company, that I am literally a micro enterprise, means that on the good side of it, I haven't had staff to worry about and so on. So yes, I mean, it's right now, any generation of income is great. And yes, I am taking sessions for maybe 3 or 4 people where I maybe wouldn't have done that in the past. But yes, it's working for me, and it'll be like that going forward.
Tracy, I just noticed that you kind of said there in passing, surprisingly, local people are coming, or
Yeah.
the ROI or the GB, and I think definitely, and I might have been guilty of this too, we might have assumed some of our food and drink experiences or farm experiences would not be of interest to a domestic market. We've kind of just assumed that, like, who'd want to go and bake bread if you were Irish, but actually you seem to have had the experience that they are.
Yeah, gosh, it's been really, I have learned so much. What I would say is that, first of all, for Southerners coming up here, because you don't have soda bread and potato bread and so on, that's something new. For Northern Ireland people, they're coming in and learn. It's all about tradition. Their grandmother made it, and she never gave them the recipe, and there were no quantities, and so they're totally into it. And I actually love that as well, because I'm learning from them too. And the other thing I would say, probably more than anything else, is that ultimately I promote this as an experience. I don't promote it as a cookery school or a class. We don't have any recipes to read off. We don't weigh or measure anything. So I want my guests to come and make memories, and to really feel that this was an experience, that it wasn't just about learning how to make soda bread.
So you did make that step from I bake bread to experience, standing in their shoes. What's the experience?
Yes, that's it. I mean, they're coming in and they're not probably sure what to expect, but very, very quickly, especially given that it's my home, I have to extend a very warm welcome and make people feel very much at ease and relaxed. And to be honest, again, I've worked closely in terms of receiving training and help and support and so on from Gary and the team within TNI. I have been able to turn that around into a tourism experience, as opposed to just a standard cookery class that you come to,
Brilliant. Tracy, I have another question, and then I'll let other people ask questions. I have loads of questions for you. But one is, I think people, they might have a great product, a great idea, service. They're getting the beginnings of positive feedback from their visitors, but actually putting that into an experience. And we're going to speak about this a little bit. Could you talk us through a bit? You've stepped into their side, like it's literally breaking it down step by step. What happens when they arrive? What happens next? What happens when they leave? What actually pack 2.5 hours is a decent amount of time to fill up. Can you kind of say, like, what's a typical like from your side to be hosting that? And kind of as well, I'm interested, how much prep and after time is there for you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's one thing I would say for sure, Tina, and there is no doubt that this is both labor intensive, both mentally and physically. If you don't really enjoy interacting with people and visitors and hearing the same question maybe 20 times, then don't do it. Because that is definitely one thing that will happen. In terms of the experience, so visitors arrive, I obviously have to send out directions and so on, because I am definitely off the beaten track a bit. They'll arrive to my fruit soda bannock and tea or coffee, because you can't arrive to somebody's home and not get a cup of tea. And so made to feel welcome, and everybody meets everybody else. And then they all have their own griddle, their own workstation, and they start with soda bread or treacle bread, and then they go on to the wheaten and then potato, and then we do sort of focaccia bread now as well. And then the tables are laid and ready to go for when they have finished. And they will then sit down at the various different tables, and basically, as I say to them when they arrive, be prepared to eat. don't be on a diet. Don't be asking about calories. This is all about eating, and it's all about connecting. I've had on so many sessions, maybe a couple from Port Stewart and a couple from Fermanagh and a couple from Australia and a couple from Cumber, and they've all connected and chatted and enjoyed each other's company. And they want to hear the story and they want to enjoy the crack.
Tracy, thanks so much for sharing that, because
no problem.
I think probably to an extent, my observation is that you have packaged this into an experience that's very viable, very sellable, very repeatable, and very referable. And when you put it there, it sounds simple, and that's actually the magic, to make it that simple and to make it come across. And it's interesting that your experience of hosting so many now, that it's back to the connection, the crack, the other people, the story, and we don't need to get more complicated than that most of the time.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Tina, what you're saying. It is, people just want to connect with you. And one thing that I have realized, that it is about me, actually. Again, it took Gary Quaid to say, Tracy, this is actually about you. This wouldn't be the same if it was somebody else. So I think that's a really important thing, is that, people have mentioned we're great for our crack and our friendship and all of that. It is about you, and it has to be about you and your experience,
Yeah, brilliant. Gary, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, just to come in, I think I put it in the chat there to say that if I can leave Tracy's Farmhouse Kitchen with a bag of bread that's actually edible, anyone can do it. But it's the lovely thing about Tracy's is that it is Tracy's home from home. And, I've been there many times and was doing the bread making a few weeks ago. And, the chickens are at the door. The chickens want to come in and get some of the bread that you're baking. But just linking back to Tina, one of the points that you raised earlier was all about this heritage and tradition. And if we don't have ambassadors like Tracy who want to continue to teach people about the traditional breads of Northern Ireland and about how Granny used to make it, if we keep going down this sort of trajectory, that can be lost. So Tracy is really on this heritage side, and on the cultural side, really keeping those stories alive. And I think it's a lovely experience, and one that, if you're not working or connecting with Tracy, that you should absolutely look into it.
So immersive and participatory food and drink experiences, the two big words in tourism. We went from, as I'm sure you've heard in every workshop you've been on, delivering food and drink experiences, or delivering food and drink products and services, and delivering visitor products and services, to delivering experiences. And the words that go with that is immersive and participatory. I'm going to add something to that I haven't as yet added on anything I've done, but I think it was in my mind, I suppose, prior to COVID. I think it's all the more important with COVID, as we move along with COVID rather than after it. But the idea of empowering experiences. We've been disempowered to a large extent, and I think empowering was something that was on the up beforehand anyway. And what I mean by that, and bearing it in mind, is that we're not delivering. We've gone past delivering, as I said, that we've gone on to experiences. It's all been about experiences. We've gone on to immersion, like that idea. I can always, when I see pictures of Tracy's business, I haven't had the pleasure of the experience yet, but I always see people with their hands in the flour, kneading the flour, or the flour falling through. And I feel that when you see the photo, it is even quite immersive in itself. Participating, you're around her kitchen table, you're able to do that, you're able to sit down, you're able to eat. Gary saying there he took it home and people were actually able to eat it, and the participation continued. But I think the idea of empowering people and enabling people is a nice mindset to have as well. That idea there of, for example, Tracy's experience, and I'll keep picking Tracy now because she shared it with everyone, so we've all heard it, but the Irish people whose nana never left them the recipe, for example, that idea of opening up and enabling people to do. I bet you those people, for example, always said, God, I wish she'd left us the recipe. I wish she'd left us, and we'll never have the bread again. And suddenly you've empowered them to do that. Or empowering people, that's the sense I have now of health and safety. So you don't want to be chaperoning people, you don't want to be regulating people, but the approach to health and safety is about empowering them to feel safe, empowering them to leave their home, empowering them to come into you and feel safe. I think opening up something like the ability to touch, I'm going to show you a picture now, touch an animal, make your own food, taste the gin that has just been made, meet the person who made the gin. That is things that we do not have the ability to do ourselves, and more visitors are looking for direction on how to do that. They're looking for permission to do that, and they're looking for reassurance that they're going to be okay if they do that. And that's that sense of empowerment that I believe tourism and hospitality can bring in an age where we have been disempowered and where we have been restricted. We have the ability to liberate people, even if only for a little while. And I think that's something to add to reasons to be proud of what tourism can bring in the moment. And this occurred to me as I was polishing this presentation last night, was the wonderful everyday. Some ad has that. I'm not sure which ad. If anybody knows, tell me, because it's wrecking my head to know which one it is. But it just came to me. So much about food and drink experiences is about what's wonderful, what's normal, but what's wonderful at one and the same time. And I wanted to share what I notice as common kind of mistakes or barriers people make. And I don't know if any of these resonate with any of you, but and I could be off the mark, but it's just what I tend to see with people is that we dismiss how special and memorable what we do can be for visitors. And dismiss might be a strong word in that, but even something as simple as Tracy saying there, well, I didn't think Irish people would be interested. We almost make the assumption, or somebody says a visitor saw what they did and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe that. And you kind of go, sure God, there was nothing special in that at all. And we continuously dismiss something that is very special and very memorable to others. And Tracy mentioned the word memory there. Making memories is a large extent. And like I said, at our kitchen table, when we talk about California in 2016, it's the strawberries, the memory of that moment. And so much of it is about that. And to keep that front and foremost, that what you do and what you enable people to do is really special. We dismiss the positive feedback. Exactly that scenario where I can't believe anybody would pay for this, or I can't believe that they find that interesting. Then that's the thing. I think with positive feedback, when you get it, and we all get it, when you get it, drink it in. Just drink it in and say, okay, somebody was so moved by what I did that they actually volunteered feedback that was positive. We don't tend to do that. It actually has to quite stir us to give positive feedback and to volunteer it. So anytime you get a compliment or positive feedback, and this isn't a life lesson, this relates to experiences, is absolutely take that in. Anything anyone has written about you in TripAdvisor, anything that someone has sent you in an email, those are your unique selling points. Those are the things that people most were moved to say back to you. Don't do it. People don't do their experience because they think other people would think they're mad. Okay, I'm sure, Tracy, there were people who thought you were mad that anybody would pay to learn how to make bread, for example. There's probably points where people thought that, or you know, bringing families towards experiences that are normal or unsafe. That's the other thing. The idea of being mad. So I think none of it is mad, and none of it is mad now more than ever. We're looking for innovation, new ideas, new experiences, put them all out there. People wait until they've perfected the experience before starting. And I think there's an element of which you have to really shape out your experience, and there's an element of where you just have to get started. So you find out what people are saying to you, what's special and what's memorable, and you chisel and polish it as you go along. Inconsistent and unpredictable availability, and I call this kind of the dipping your toe in the water phenomenon, which is what we all start with. We dip our toe, we do it in the side, we try it out, but an experience above all else needs to be consistently and predictably available if visitors are going to be able to sign up, or if anybody here on this call, for example, was going to be able to refer you or connect with you, and that in the early stages can be a big challenge. Talking to everybody and targeting nobody. You'll have heard this on any experience call, not particularly related to food and drinks. You do have to really target to a segment or to several segments, but speak to them separately. And that's a whole big area we won't go into here, but there, as I say, the common mistakes I see as we go along. So we're talking about immersive and participatory experiences. And like I say, I realize I'm in company here where you're already offering that and you have chiseled it quite a lot. So feel free to share any of your experiences. This is one of my favorites, because this idea of getting started. This is Slayhead in County Kerry, where I was driving along. I since met the person who put up this sign, who has a very viable business for holding a baby lamb. And and the lamb can be a sheep depending on the time of the year you get there. But there was a lot of passing traffic. It was out to Slayhead, it's a very beautiful peninsula in County Kerry. So I also put the caveat that there was passing traffic for this, but there's lots of places that did have the passing traffic. So he saw an opportunity for Hold a Baby Lamb. This is the farmer. There is one of these huts that you would have seen on Star Trek on his farm as well. You can see it wasn't particularly minded or well tended. It was probably a calf house or a sheep house or something like that. Some visitors stopped to see people who were passing by stopped to see the sheep at the side of the road and take the pictures. I'm sure you've seen them. And he just saw that and he went, there's something in this, and saw the opportunity. And now people stop to hold the baby lamb. I've taken these photos. They're not great quality because they've come from people's Facebook pages and TripAdvisor pages who are literally gushing at the idea of, oh my God, I cannot believe I got to touch a lamb. I cannot believe I held a lamb. This is the most amazing thing I ever did. This is the best thing I did in Ireland. And he charges something like €3 to hold a lamb. You can see the one nearer us there in the blue jacket it's getting bigger. And there are some genuinely that are quite a bit bigger. And but people see this as unbelievable that they had that opportunity, because if you're a city dweller and never came near an animal, which is the case, you may never have been near a farm animal, that is sensational and mind-blowing. And so I think you'd be hard pushed to get an Irish person to pose holding a lamb, but these were the boast photos from these particularly US North American visitors. So I would think, look at the simplicity of everything you do first and foremost, and see what he did, which is interesting, is he put up a sign, so he let it know it was available. He was there if people stopped. He had a price and he knew exactly what he was giving people for that price. Eventually coach tours are stopping and 50 people are paying €3 a head. And that's what happens because buses started to stop once they knew the guy was definitely there, that it was consistent and predictable. So that's an example of an experience. This is another example. It doesn't have to be that. This is just somebody in a farmer's market or at a festival. You've all been this, where the engagement with the people was really strong on what you were saying Northern Ireland has to offer, and it definitely is. The opportunity to speak with you, Tracy endorsed that as well, that you are the experience is so important. Just thinking about making sure that visitors have enough time to talk and interact. Here's a picture from a toolkit book actually that you're going to receive shortly. I'll let Gary speak about that later on. But it could be meeting the cheesemaker, it could be tasting the gin or the whiskey or the cider, it could be a sheepdog demonstration, it could be a walk on the Giant's Causeway with a taste of Bushmills, it could be a visit to the goat farm. Food and drink could be a meal in the restaurant. It could be a chat with the chef and the meal in the restaurant. There's just so many elements to this. It could be just the person who serves the table being able to share the experience of the gin they're serving, being able to share the story behind that. All of those things are what create memories. So this is wide open. And as I said, more ideas are better. Finding the place on your plate, this sense of place. And this is one of the big things in any destination that I've been working in, and any place that's involved in tourism, food tourism and drink tourism, is bringing the wonderful produce, the wonderful stories that go with that, the people who are involved in that, and getting it on the plate when you go and order something in a restaurant or a cafe or from a food truck at the side of the road or even in a deli. That connection that when I'm in this place that I'm able to taste the food of the place. So that's kind of quite sensational for people when those moments happen, when that clicks. And I'll share a couple with you that do click, but I'll be fair and be honest, 9.5 times out of 10, that doesn't really happen. It's the rarity that happens, and that tends to be a real stretch area for every destination. So, or not, finding the place on your plate is one thing. It's fantastic, but it's actually really disappointing if you don't. So if I manage to spend, which could happen in my county, it could happen in most counties in Ireland, if I spend 2 or 3 days in your place and I actually don't get anything on the plate that I couldn't have got somewhere else, it is a bit disappointing. It really is. If you get something you could have bought in London or something you could have bought in New York, and that's what you see all the time, or you get kind of nondescript stuff that has not given you any story, at this point, given what I've explained there about how our attitudes have changed and that the large cohort of leisure visitors are really interested in this right now, it actually ends up being disappointing. So I don't actually know, I don't have enough, Gary, I'm sure you'll speak more when we break on this part, as to how strong that connection is in Northern Ireland, but and I'm sure you'll all be able to fill me in. It would be interesting to know. So this sense of place has to extend really to kind of round the circle to what you get on your plate when you order for someone who is going to serve food to you. So I'm talking about restaurants, cafes, eateries. Much of what we've spoken to before might apply to tours and to farm and to produce. But there's just, again, self-check questions. Do you source locally produced food? And I know there's all kinds of considerations around that, but opening the conversation on it is important. What percentage of food and drink purchases are local? And local is one of those words in food and drink tourism. There's very little agreement as to how you would define local, right? That's one of the things. It depends on the ingredient is what I would say. It doesn't mean that, and no disrespect to McDonald's, and genuinely no disrespect to McDonald's, it doesn't mean McDonald's in your town. That's not local. It's food and drink of your place. And that's, I suppose, really important thing. It might be that the best black butter local to me in Clare is the one that I can get on the Causeway Coast. It might be, and to me that would be local in that case. For example, I hear different chefs. There are chefs who will not source anything beyond 15 kilometers of their restaurant because they hang their hat on being local. There are other chefs who say, I want the best produce on this island. The island is only, 360 miles long. Everything on it is local, so it depends. But I would say whatever you regard as local, it's important to define that and let your visitors know what it is. What can a visitor get to eat on your premises that they can't get anywhere else in the country? And that's the big, big question. And if there is nothing on your menu right now that they couldn't get anywhere else, then that can be addressed. That can be addressed, at least for one dish, at least for one item, at least for one course or one day or one event or something like that. But that's the really important thing about a sense of place. What can I get here that I couldn't get anywhere else? And it might be that you just get the story that's there. It doesn't have to be that I'm the only one who makes this particular whatever. But it's just a good question to ask yourself. How knowledgeable are you about what's available locally, and how knowledgeable are your staff in particular? Often the owner is very well connected to their suppliers and the recipes and all the rest, but the staff may not just be able to answer questions. And I'd love to hear your experiences on this. More and more people seem to be asking that. Like, they'll read their menu and go, well, where is that beef from? Or where's that goat's cheese from? Or whatever. And people being able to share the story, that's often where we create memories as well. So you have a great idea, you have a great product, but do you have a great experience? And I think this is probably the area that I think Gary probably wants to know more about, but everybody wants to know more about. Having the great product and the great service, the great idea isn't enough. Putting it into a tourism experience that's accessible, buyable, representative of your area is really important. I did mention a toolkit. Gary does have a new kind of food and drink tourism experience toolkit that has some guidance on this for different sectors. So if you're a producer, if you're a grower, if you're in the drinks side of things, if you're a tour guide, whatever that is. But for all of them, the Embrace a Giant Spirit experience framework is there, and I think T&I have actually really put together some really solid tools to help businesses on the ground bring what they have to offer to experience level. This page is from the toolkit. You may have seen it before in other ones. So some of the key criteria for giant taste experiences would be sustainable, welcoming to everyone, distinctively Northern Irish, innovative, local and seasonal, open and available, participatory, all the things we've mentioned before, and all the things that I think you probably know within yourself. I would see that as a checklist. Again, it's another way for going back over and checking yourself, and that's the opportunity we have now, where we're back in our counties again. I'm not sure exactly what your restrictions are there, but we're in a period of restriction. We have time to really go back and say, okay, how am I doing on that? Imagine I scored myself on a scale of 1 to 5. How am I doing on sustainability? How am I doing innovation? How much is this purely about distinctively Northern Irish as opposed to general food and drink? And if I was to change it by 1%, what would I do? It's a really nice. Yep. Somebody coming in on that? No, okay. So that's there as a framework and a checklist, and I'd say, Gary, you may speak about it again as well. The other thing is enhancing. So in order to develop or improve your visitor experience, there are 5 key components of world-class food and drink experiences. And these can seem quite generic when you say them: product, service, place, story, and storytelling. But I think you know, drill down into them. Again, it's like a checklist. We don't have time to really dwell through every one of these in terms of experience creation. What I'm doing is pointing you to the toolkit. I'm pointing you to some checkpoints, I suppose, for yourself to say, okay, let's look at that element of my experience. Have I got a storytelling element to it? Let's look at that element. Is the place coming to life through it? And it's a nice way for you to work through that yourself in terms of a framework for improving it. Storytelling, Tracy mentioned it there, you know, it's all about the stories. You've mentioned people as one of the top things that Northern Ireland has to offer to visitors in this area. I would think it's one of our natural things to do. One of our natural things as Irish people is to tell stories. It's how we relate to each other. We chat in stories. So I almost get a bit nervous when I put this up there because it sounds like it's a very formal thing to do. I would put this down to just being yourself. And like Tracy said, you are the experience. Back to people looking for connection. They really want to connect with locals and they want to be enabled to connect with each other. And it's like the food or drink is just the crutch that lets them do that. So to a large extent, this happens organically. I think the biggest challenge with this is that you underestimate your story. You underestimate when you're, I'm not directing this at anyway, one underestimates the story and one underestimates allowing time within the whole experience for people just to chat to you, you to chat to them to chat to each other while they're on an experience. And we have an enormous cache of stories available to us, and they might be as simple as you know, the title you've given yourself, and they might be something elaborate like the history of bread making in Ireland since the famine or something. You know, it could be any level of stuff, but there are stories of ingredients, dish, drink, recipe, the craft itself, the process. A lot of that is really important in the whiskies and gins and beers side of things. The producers, the land, what grows here, why does it grow here, how does it grow here, what's different about this, what grows here that wouldn't be anywhere else, why does beef taste like this here and lamb taste like that there, that's different to other parts of the country. Society, history, chef, team, your forefathers, your taste, your method, people who are 3rd and 4th generation on their place or in their craft. There's, and I mean ... because there's literally no end of ways you can tell and your story and for it to come out. And the one I haven't added there is you yourself. You are the most interesting part of the story, or your team are the most interesting part of the story, bearing in mind what visitors want to get out of this. I'm going to introduce this, but Gary, you can come in on this as well. TNI have an experience development framework, and I think it's interesting for businesses who have experiences to be aware of this. TNI's not there, everybody in the organization, but Gary's in the experience development section. There are a team of people who are there to support businesses in developing experiences, and from their point of view and how they do that, there is a 5-step process. So there is a thing called the complete, the Embrace a Giant Spirit experience template, which I think you will get sent to you after this as well. Some of you, if you're already have completed this, will know about it. I have it here. It's like, I don't know if you can see that. It's a form. It's a form that you fill out, which is a template to get you thinking about the ins and outs of your experience. And I think this is a really important thing. When you look at it first, I'll be honest, it's about 4 pages. There could be 30 questions. There could even be more on that. And you'll be going, oh Lord, is it that complicated? And it's not that it's that complex, but it is a discipline of working through all the detail of your experience. And it's a great process for moving from, I have a great idea and a great experience and I'm getting really good feedback, to elevating and enhancing, those 2 words you saw in the last 2 slides, to elevating that to a world-class giant experience. You know, so you're getting a little bit of consistency across everybody in Northern Ireland who's offering experiences, but you're also getting it down to the point where it's like really hitting all the right points in terms of memorability with visitors, in terms of enjoyment, in terms of surprise, in terms of discovery, and allowing them to live, you know, embrace the giant spirit as well. So one of the asks from today is, if you have an experience already and it's worth review and you can have more than one experience, or if you're in the early stages and you haven't engaged with TNI, and that to embrace the template and fill that out as much as you can, and get started on that process, because it is the science end of tourism to an extent, to get your experience really right. Once you have that in, you can have a site visit with the experience development officer. So somebody comes to you and helps to kind of review that. It's fresh eyes from the outside. It looks at what visitors are pointing out, what visitors might be seeing. Then business support analysis is kind of the third stage. You work through these stages as your experience gets more refined as you go along. Brand aligned experiences. TNI at the moment, I think, is 23 brand demonstrators. I know there's a couple of them on the call as well. There could be more than that, where you're really, animators for the brand, and then key account management status. So it's a step-by-step, I suppose, up along the steps in terms of engaging with this experience development team in TNI. And I think it's good to be aware that that's where they're at. It's good to know where you are on the process, or are you even pre this process, or are you at stage 5? If you're at stage 5 and you've already a great experience and you want to go back and create a new one, then it comes through that process again as well. And on that stage, I think, Gary, I'll invite you in if you have anything to add on that particular one.
Yeah, Tina, thanks. I think you summed that up quite well, but with a caveat, as you mentioned, that everyone here on the call is on their own sort of different stages of development. When we're looking at the sort of food and drink experiences, I'm looking at Tracy and Wendy and our brand demonstrators who have gone through that 5-stage process in terms of getting an experience that sits underneath Embrace a Giant Spirit, which is all about the connections with people from Northern Ireland. It's that element of participation. It's getting an experience that you won't get anywhere else. I know that I'm doing work at the minute with with Jim and with Maureen at Symphonia, to bring them through that 5-stage process. So after today's call, everyone will get a copy of the toolkit that Tina has alluded to, which is a specific focus on food and drink experiences. And we'll also send out a blank template of the Embrace a Giant Spirit and sort of brand submission. You may not be at that stage, but it's, use this as a tool to start to, commit to some of the areas that we've talked about today, so that we can start that development process with you. We may have some of our brand demonstrators that want to create something fresh and new, given the situation and the environment that we're all working in, and that's great. We can start to pick that up again. So, we'll give you the slides, we'll give you the toolkit, we will give you the experience brand submission, but it's the start of the journey, in a sense. It's about opening up the conversations. It's about looking at Embrace a Giant Spirit and the next phase for Northern Ireland in terms of taking that into the marketplace when we're allowed and when it's safe and appropriate for us all to do so. But I specifically look after all of the food and drink contacts and experiences at Tourism NI. So I look forward to following up with everyone afterwards and hopefully taking a number of you through that 5-step process. I think, sort of 56% of us here currently aren't offering a food and drink experience. So, there's half of you in this call that have the ability to either deliver or get involved in something, and that's really exciting for me.
Gary, without giving us away any of the inner secrets of TNI, are you awash with food and drink experiences, or are you short in them, or have you many in the pot as such when you go out to the world, when you're telling the story of food and drink tourism in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, the profile that we have, and I suppose those that have been proud food ambassadors before the brand, and like the guys that we have here in the call, our Tracy's and our Wendy's and our orchard tours. But it's now about finding some of the new and exciting projects that are coming down the line. When we talk about our small craft distilleries, when we're talking about our farm visits, when we're talking about food tours, when we look at Northern Ireland as a destination, and I think you picked up on it earlier, Tina, that we want to encourage regional spread. But in order for us to encourage visitors into other pockets of Northern Ireland, we need the tourism hooks in order to get them there. So I wouldn't say that we're awash, Tina. The ones that we have are of really high standard and great quality, but we do need more so that we can start that process of spotlighting other regions, so that it's not patchy and there aren't gaps in it for the visitor. So hopefully, when we reflect on this call in a year's time, that we actually might have 1 or 2 little gems popping up in other areas of NI.
It's definitely an area, isn't it, Gary, where you can have, you know, a world-class, fantastic food experience somewhere, but on its own, it's hard to get people to really come. You know, people are looking for a bit happening in the place, you know, if they wanted. And that idea Nikki had earlier, you know, what about a gin club, for example, like that can break through for a visitor. Then it's like, oh, what, I could go to the 6 counties of Northern Ireland and have a gin experience. Then suddenly that's like, oh, even if they don't actually do that, the idea that they could, you need everyone to be together to elevate the appeal of the place, don't you?
Absolutely, and it's important that we do start to collaborate, and we do sometimes take for granted, and we've talked about this a whole lot in terms of that domestic mindset, not only from the visitor's perspective, but also us as residents. And I think you picked up on it as well, Tina, earlier. It's not about how far, it's about how near. And it's about trying to join up some of those dots and try and foster a little bit of collaboration, so that if we do have food tours and we do have our distillery visits, we do have our farm visits, we do have opportunities to meet the maker, how can we start to come together and generate a little bit of a swell for the destination, so that it's not in for 1 hour's distillery visit and we're leaving again? Yeah. How can we start thinking about building itineraries? How can we keep people in the place longer? Hopefully, you know, that we are staying overnight and that we are putting cash in tills of restaurants and hotels. And that's really, you know, what we're trying to achieve here with the food and drink workshops. Is let's kick off some of those ideas, you know, yeah, think aspirationally and work together.
Brilliant. Because you all know that you're invited back to workshops next week as well. This week we're trying to really focus on, you know, the individual experience, but really we're moving towards next week very much a focus on that. How can we connect and collaborate? We couldn't fit them all in one long Zoom workshop, but it also means you have a chance between this week and next week to be thinking about that, and to be even talking to each other. You've made a lot of connections, I can see there in the chat as well, talking to each other and coming back with ideas. It would be really good for next week. And I feel a lot of energy from the chat there and what people are saying, and we can pick that up again next week. And as Gary said, it's the start of a process for all of you guys as well. I'm just going to, Tracy, while we're chatting, I want to bring you in there as well and ask, and Wendy, feel free to come in on this as well. You are brand demonstrators in the first kind of round of brand demonstrators for TNI, but that idea of engaging with TNI, I've outlined a process there, and I'm really conscious that some people will look at that and look at the form, to be fair, Gary, and go, oh God, this is a big step to climb. But, you know, how important is it to engage with TNI? Is it important? Have you had benefits? And would you or would you not encourage others to do it? And I really am encouraging you to be very honest. I'm not trying to flatter Gary, but Joe, for the benefit of everybody who's here, Wendy, you're ready to come in, and Tracy, I'll take you as well in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I started my business the same time as Tracy back in 2016, and really one of my first ports of call was to speak to Tourism Northern Ireland, just to see, you know, if my idea had legs and if it was something that was viable. And really, I can't stress it enough. From day one, they have been fantastic. I think I would say, honestly, hand on heart, especially with my experience as part of the Embrace the Giant Spirit group at the moment is Catch and See, where we take people out at sunrise, they catch their own fish, and then we bring it back and they get it cooked up for breakfast. Now, that was the product I put forward for Embrace the Giant Spirit, but even before that time, Tourism NI had picked up on it because it was very unique. So the FAM trips, you know, the links I've had with the TNI media team in terms of journalist visits and things, that has really lifted the profile of that experience. And to be honest, and I say it to everybody, I'm just not sure if I would still be in business if it wasn't for their support and their motivation. And yeah, you know, even just, I've been speaking to Gary really in the last couple of weeks. It's great to have Gary on board now as a really good direct contact for food and drink. And in a year where we could all very easily, you know, panic and think, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? I have to say, you know, I have continually been inspired and know that, okay, it's not the year we expected, but it's been nice to be involved with the other, you know, demonstrators as well, and the other experience providers. We know what we've got here. We know we've got really good quality, and we just need to get through this. But I would say definitely use Tourism NI, work with them, listen to them. And I know after I met with Gary a couple of weeks ago about plans for next year, I came away buzzing again. And sometimes it's nice just to have that external person to bounce ideas off and just to get a feel of, if you're going in the right direction. And I have to say, there's a lot of different organisations. I'm very much involved with Taste Causeway here on the North Coast. Feel very, very lucky to be part of that. It's a great collaboration. And again, that's how I built a lot of my contacts as well, being involved in that network, meeting new producers, new hospitality providers, having the confidence to put experiences together. But then I have been involved with as well in terms of different festival committees I've been involved in. So the message always, speak to these people, work with these people. Between you all, you can be inspired, you can be motivated. And I really wouldn't like to function without any of those organisations I've mentioned, the local tourism people in the council as well. It's just really, really important to communicate. And I think sometimes people maybe think, oh, well, I'm not getting the help, or I don't know where to go for help. You have to communicate. No one else can mind read what you want to do, and I'm just not shy in asking or running an idea past somebody, and I think that's what keeps me going anyway.
Well, Wendy, and that's what I meant by the phrase "meet your luck halfway." If you have the idea and the energy, reach out, because the help is there. I do think that, and I use the analogy here. Sometimes it's like, people, it's the dipping the toe in tourism without really going for it, and realizing that's a whole different industry with a whole set of new rules and ball games. And TNI are there to help. You don't have to navigate it all by yourself. And I say the same about Fáilte Ireland here. When I started in tourism, honestly, I heard there's so much, and I still hear it in counties I go to. Fáilte Ireland will do nothing for you. Or they came here one day and talked to me about this. I went to a workshop and I never heard from them again. And I always say, well, did they hear from you again? Or because if they didn't, they heard from 2 other people, I'm sure, who got a lot of help. So that's one of the things, that the help is there. And it's a bit like wanting to win the Six Nations without registering with the IRFU. You're not going to win if TNI don't know you're there, purely because this is a big area.
Yeah.
It is a growth area, and it is a skill. There's skill attached to becoming good and successful in tourism, and you don't have to be on your own. That's the important thing.
No,
I was up on the Causeway actually this summer as part of my holidays, and I got a hamper from Taste Causeway, and we're still working our way through it, but it's one of those fabulous things about food tourism, because I can keep talking about it to other people, and we keep eating about it, and it keeps reminding us what we have. So it's nice. You've been able to package your place together there, which people can buy it. It's lovely, and its visibility. Thanks so much for coming in on that, Wendy, because you didn't know I was going to pop a question at you, so thank you. Tracy, have you anything to add on that? I keep going back to Tracy as well. She'll be sorry, she offered to talk to me too, but
No, I think Wendy has really, everything I say, Wendy, that sticks 100%. I would say as well, it can be a lonely role or road to take at times, because, and probably again very much like Wendy in this respect, but I'm on my own. I'm doing it all myself, everything from the idea through to ordering materials, to social media, to the cooking, to absolutely all aspects of it. And at times it's really great to be able to pick up the phone to Gary and say, Gary, what am I doing here? And as Wendy says, he then gives you the kind of the motivation to go on again and keep going. And the other thing is, in terms of the Embrace a Giant spirit, I mean, Tourism Northern Ireland took us to the World Travel Market last year. I already knew Wendy anyway, but we got to meet with lots of other fantastic brand demonstrators, and it actually it motivated me no end to know that Team Northern Ireland, we're brilliant. We have so much to offer, and we don't shout it loud enough, really, is what I think.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Wendy, for sharing in that. And like I say, I mean that really genuinely. This is the team you're on. It is be part of that team. You're part of the team who's on the call today in terms of food and drink experiences, and working with TNI and Tourism Ireland, who market the island of Ireland, are always looking for experiences from you as well. So that's the team you're on. That's the club you're in. So, you know, make the most of your membership, I guess, is part of that. So I'm going to move on now again. Actually, had anybody else any questions? Sorry, I'm having a private chat there. By anybody else want to come in on anything before I move on?
Tina, I'd just like to say that we opened on the 1st of February, Wild Atlantic Distillery in County Tyrone. We promptly closed on the 1st of March with COVID. And it was a huge shock trying to figure out where to go and what to do. And I just was fortunate enough to meet Gary in that month of February. And that was a lifesaver for us, because last week we did the Irish Open golf for the hand sanitizer, got all that through Tourism and I, and it gave us a real refocus and planning for the future when we were thinking about where does our business go now, thinking about do we close for forever. So just for Gary and the team around Tourism and I, it's been fantastic for us. And last week I was on a phone call with him and I called him my psychologist, because I ring him religiously. And it's without that kind of support and backup, you sometimes wonder, are you going the right way? Will you still be here when all this is over? So just to Gary and his team, they've been amazing for a new business. It was a bit of a shock. So we wouldn't be here without the likes of their support and help. So big thank you to them. And of course yourself, and these webinars have been fantastic as well. You know, good for us to touch base with other people in the same situation.
Yeah. Jim, thanks so much for sharing that. And I see Tracy and Wendy nodding vigorously there as you're talking. Gary, did you want to come in on any of that in case anybody thinks you're their psychologist?
I didn't pay anyone. You know, there was no bribe taken to say that. But, you know, this is what it's all about, you know, and as Tina said, we are here. If you have an idea, if you currently are delivering or developing an experience, if you want to reach out to talk through some of the ideas, we're not all on the same journey. But we as a tourism organisation, we need the new stories, we need the new hooks, we need the new experiences. So as Tina said, that we can start to filter that through, not only within our organisation, but also through Tourism Ireland and the international marketplace when that starts to recover again. So, you know, thanks very much everyone for the comments. You probably kept me in a job for another few months, which is great. But you know, it's lovely to hear the feedback, but it's also lovely to pick up on Tracy and Wendy and the relationships that have been formed and that level of collaboration going forward. And you know, you can't buy that, you know, and that's the important thing. But if you're motivated to do it, you know, meet your luck halfway. And I love that. I've scribbled that down as well. So no, thanks everyone for that feedback, and it's great to hear your individual journeys.
I'm stealing that phrase from James E. McCloy of Glenshane Country Farm in case he's on the call or hears me repeating what he said yesterday. He was on a call with me yesterday and he said that, and it just landed, you know, grab every opportunity that comes your way and it'll come back at you. Anybody else want to come in? I see lots of things in the chat. There's people on from, I can't read them all now, you know, there's a lady there from the District Council, others from NI, others offering, you know, whatever, just take all those. There's, as I said, there's a team at work, so, and you're all on it, so that's great. I'm going to move on now to packaging and presenting food and drink experiences. And again, I'd be interested to hear what your experience on this is. Wendy already alluded to their collaborating with others, getting things together. I mentioned the hamper, that's a packaging of food and drink as well. It's the idea of lingering on the experience to an extent afterwards. And I do another workshop about the experience continuum, I would call it. You know, as experiences have developed, it's got a lot wider. I'm here making gestures, I don't think you can see me, but like the experience starts really when people start thinking about maybe I'll go to Northern Ireland, and it goes all the way on to I'm back now and I'm still putting you know, black butter on my I'm using that at breakfast, and we're having, you know, little bits and pieces out of our hamper as we go, and they're real little treats and delights, and as a result we're recommending it to other people because it stays fresh in our mind. So this continuum of, it's not just when they're with you, it's the entire embracing. And as referrals and recommendations become more important as well. And we fully expect that over the next number of years, that we're going to rely a lot more, less on bloggers and influencers, the things that have been really big for the last period of time, because people are very aware now of people being paid. It came up in COVID that they'll pay influencers to tell us to wear masks, and people are kind of getting cynical about that. We'll see some of that, but I think we're always going to value what our friends and family say, and that's really quite important. So great idea, great product, great experience. You've ticked all the boxes so far. Is it easy to see you, and is it easy to buy you? And this is what I really mean by packaging and presenting. So I know it's fantastic and fabulous, but can I buy it? When can I come and see it? How do I find out if I'm doing a random Google search, things to do in Northern Ireland? Are you coming up there? Or Food Northern Ireland or Food Experience Northern Ireland, what's coming up, and can I see it easily and readily? I think I use this as a little checklist for visitor experiences being market ready. And what we mentioned earlier about the Embrace a Giant Spirit template, for example, and the filling that out is what is part of the getting yourself market ready. And actually, I often call it like honoring your experience, honoring how brilliant it is, and just making sure people can see it and they can buy it. It's like being, you know, if I want to buy milk, I go to the supermarket, I know what section to get, I know how much it costs, I know what I'm going to need to carry it out of the shop, etc., etc. Things are really buyable in retail. It's a little bit harder to package up an experience and make enable people to understand what it is you're offering. But I do think of your carton of milk. How could you make it as easy as that? How will people know where to go, and how will they know what they're getting? So there's a few things, and these are just, they're random. They're in no particular order, but again, it's a checklist. Particularly a food and drink experience. Letting people know the time of the day that they can have it. What's the time when it's available? What's the price? Can I rely on that? Is it consistent and predictable? I see, I'm not saying it's any of your places, but I would look generally just doing research and checking out experiences. A lot of things, well, ring for appointment, or ring to find out availability, or here's Tom's number and he'll let you know. That's not anything a visitor can plan around. You know, and it's a start, it's something you can do, but it's not what you'd call consistent and predictable. And if you want to get into that space, you may need to take the hit a little while to be consistently and predictably available at 10 o'clock every day, and nobody might come for 4 or 5 of those days. But the people who can refer you and the visitors who are planning get to believe that you're there. And that phase kind of needs to happen. A place to book and a place to pay. And so much of that has moved online now. So you have to have very visible in anything connected to you, where I can book and where I can pay, back to contactless, back to ease, back to reassurance at the point of booking and paying, so that even if you have online facility on your website, that it's not just functionality. It's not just the ability to pay, but that's part of your messaging, that all the way through that you're reassuring people and letting them know where you are and everything. The duration of the experience, Tracy said it's 2.5 hours. That's something people can plan around. If it's 1 hour, they can plan around it, whatever it is, but having a consistency around that. Equipment or restrictions. Do I need to bring anything? Is there anything I wouldn't, you know, can I bring children? Can I bring elderly people? What if I want to bring my dog? Is there any, you know, do I need wellies? Do I need to pay by credit card? It's no good that I bring cash. Whatever it is, you know, letting people know what they need to have in front of them. Safety, safety, safety was always important. It's 100 times more important now. The reassurance around that on every element, not just COVID, but really on everything. We've got a real heightened sensibility of this now. And so we need to be addressing it in our messaging. Sustainability, I mentioned at the beginning, my journey in food tourism started as an expression of sustainability, as trying to make sustainable tourism sexy, for want of a better word. I still think, and it does that. If you're doing all those things you put up on your mind map, if you're doing food and drink tourism in the way I sense this group means it, it is almost inherently a sustainable approach to how you engage with visitors, how you engage with your local community, how you're keeping traditions alive, methods alive, foods alive, of your place being really important. You know, inviting visitors into to a place through the food, not you know, clearly if you have, we've taken a step back in terms of sustainability with so much one-off disposable now for health and safety reasons. that's not enough of a reason to dismiss sustainability. And you'll get that. You'll get you're doing single serve, single portion, da-da-da. But the rest of sustainability, you can still do a lot on your energy and on your water conservation. So we've always had wastewater energy as 3 big things, which is a very limited, very important, but very limited definition of sustainability. What it also means, and you remember I was speaking about regeneration and conscious travel, those other topics which are now sustainability is giving way to, because sustainability has come to mean wastewater energy. Conscious consumerism and regeneration is very much about preserving the local, protecting host communities, protecting food cultures and any other element of our culture as well, and give back to the community. This idea of visitor empowerment, and it's something you really do, is visitors want to feel, particularly let's take sustainability and when people are traveling again, if I've traveled halfway across, if I've traveled across the Atlantic from somewhere in the US or North America to come to Northern Ireland, there is now guilt attached to that. You've had a carbon impact. There was the whole flight shaming movement, I suppose, or movement might be too strong a word, but let's say the Greta movement, who stopped traveling and sailed around in a boat instead of flying, for example. We've had all of that happening. People want to know that if they've had that impact, they also want to know that their visit brought good when they got there. They need to know 2 things, that if they've come to an island like ours, right, which is a bit indulgent in the carbon scale of things, that did some good at the other end. Now, that's really important. And the second thing they want to know is that they did no more harm when they got here. Yeah, so that they minimized it when they got here and that it did some good. The doing some good, the empowerment we can give them is they are sustaining our life and our culture in places that might not have it otherwhere. They are enabling us to keep an expression of tradition and culture and heritage. You can explain that I'm working with businesses across, you know, this small region, and we're connecting all the time to keep, you know, the whole thing. You have the whole story of 20 years ago. I was on the Belfast Homecoming Call virtual conference last Friday, and they were talking about 20 years ago there would not have been tourism. 25 years ago you would not have had it on the agenda of anything. You have that whole story of, like I've had, the discovery of Northern Ireland. Visitors want that. They want that empowerment and they want to feel good about their trip. And all of that is brought into sustainability for me, to that word. And we need to be shouting loud and proud about that part of it and getting less worried about it just being wastewater and energy, because we're going to have to suck up the waste part as long as COVID is with us. But I've always believed that tourism is not, it's a bit like the how near and how far. We're always talking about the impacts are negative and we're mitigating our impacts. I actually believe the industry needs to steal the narrative and go, here's our positives. Here's what we're contributing, here's what we're bringing, here's what we're empowering and we're enabling, because that's the much bigger part of tourism. And we've seen that by it disappearing for us right now. There's a better appreciation of that. Authenticity, we've mentioned. I would equate that with simplicity. Let's not get too difficult about this. Let's stay authentic. And the authenticity comes with you being yourself. Back to people, you named it and you've heard it a number of times today. And being of the place is really important. So that's a checklist. Again, in this quieter time, you can be going through that and say, okay, have I got all that right? A really good idea for the buyability, and I would highly recommend it, is you get somebody to mystery shop you. You get somebody who doesn't know what you do, so not your partner or your children, but somebody else entirely, and go, I didn't actually, by the time I got there, I didn't want to buy anymore. Or when I was at the checkout, I still had questions. Or I would have liked if you told me a bit more about this. Or I find 2.5 hours a bit long to plan around maybe. And just see what people are saying back to you, because with the best will in the world, you cannot see this yourself. You're too close to it. And I think the mystery shop can be really useful. We're good to go. I don't think, I know lots of you have this. If you don't have it, I suppose get it. If you do have it, make sure you're messaging it a lot. It's not enough to have it hidden away somewhere on your website. This is important. This is really important to visitors and to your domestic visitor as well. It's a little mark of reassurance and safety, but which is actually speaking quite loudly to people. So I think you need to make sure that you have that. So the packaging of it to me is about buyability and saleability. The other part is about imagery and video, and a lot of this being online right now. We've gone. Most of us will be operating online for the next while again, but certainly in the research and the post holiday stage. So this is a lady who grows garlic. you may or may not know that's a garlic, you might be wondering, but it's an engaging picture. It's the happy smiley person with something in her hand and a whole field of it, and you're kind of drawn in a little bit to it. Your imagery is vital, and if you have good imagery already, there's a chance to get more now, and if you don't have it, it's something really well worth investing in, considering so much of our communication will be online. This is one of the first pictures we took in the Burren back in the day. I think I mentioned to you, it's one of my favorite pictures. It got into every kind of newspaper because it was new, it was fresh, it was engaging, it was, oh my God, is that alive? And that's what a lot of people were saying. A happy smiley person on a nice sunny day. One of our issues in the Burren, this photo shoot, I just remember it really clearly, is that we realized people were not associating the Burren, not only not with food, but with people. And they definitely weren't realizing we were on the coast, right? So this became an emblematic picture. It was a natural picture when it was taken, but it was to communicate there's a lot of people here and there's a lot of food and it's as fresh as you'll get it. And it was important that people were on the rock, you know, not in a green field, so that people could get this new image of the Burren. And at the time we got a huge amount of press coverage because that caught people by surprise. And I think you possibly have that element of surprise in many elements of what you do as well. And imagery is a great way to catch that. Media are looking for good news stories right now. You could load them into them. I think that's a big opportunity as well. This is, again, it's near me, it's St. Tola Goats Farm, but it's just that idea of people again. People and food. They've food in one picture, they've the goats in the other, they've got the happy family, they've got the team of staff. It's easy to take those pictures. Those aren't professional photos, but they bring you to life, to other people. This is a photo I've always liked. I don't know how well it does really, but I've personally liked it. It's a guy who rears turkeys and chickens, but he called himself the Happy Chicken Farmer or something like that, or the Happy Farmer. And even by naming himself the Happy Farmer, he became a story. It became something more than something else. And oh my God, can you imagine having to walk through all those turkeys? Or what must that sound like? That's what I look at it and I go, that must be really noisy. And he's looking so calm in the middle of it. So anything, put some thought, real thought into your pictures and what you want to communicate, because we are really attracted by them right now. We really were before anyway, but we really are more than ever. The other thing is video. And I wanted to share something with you as well. Video that's where it's at. Video and the whole move towards voice search is making video more important as well. If you have an Alexa, you'll know what voice search is. If you want an Alexa, you'll know what voice search is. And very soon, that's the way we'll be Google searching as well. So video is becoming more important. It can be expensive. It can be a little bit difficult to do, and it takes a good bit of setting up. But actually, we can all do it on our phones. A lot of our children, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters, fathers have drones. It's not actually that hard to do, and the desire for it to be professional is less now from the visitor point of view in favor of simplicity and authenticity. And I wanted to show you something. I don't know if this will work here because I set it up beforehand. It was a Facebook video I'm about to press start on, so it might have died in the meantime. If it does, Gary, keep talking while I get it set up again. But there's this really interesting one that I just came across by chance called Go Rural Scotland. And they, I would say they've been struggling for a good number of years by a few volunteers trying to keep farms and farm experiences, the idea of agri-tourism coming to light. And they've kind of had a moment in the last year, and they've suddenly gotten a lot of support from the top as well. But their moment came with COVID, interestingly, and they started to do videos from the farm and putting them up as Facebook Lives, and they're getting like huge amount of interest and traction. And they had not done them before, and it was literally go to a different farm in Scotland, and it might have been every day for a while, and it might be once a week now, but the people who were doing it had nothing but their phone, nothing but themselves standing in front of the phone or walking around with it, and showing their not very well set up or sophisticated farm, just actually showing the real farm as it was and speaking through it. And they were getting on average 2,500 views, and they were getting comments from all around the world. And you guarantee that is going to turn into visits when they come back, but it elevated the idea of what they're doing. So I'm going to try and share that just to give you an idea, and to say there's no excuse for any of us not to be doing videos really, because people are interested. If you have anything to add while I'm doing that, Gary, please do step in.
Yeah, Tina, I just wanted to pick up on the We're Good to Go industry standard. So for anyone who hasn't registered and who wants to register their business, go on to tourismni.com and you will see a link out to the registration page from our website. But as Tina has alluded to, not only for visitors, but just building that domestic confidence that businesses have taken steps and measures to make your experience that little bit more comfortable, you know, in this COVID-19 space. It's heavily integrated in all of our marketing campaigns. So if you haven't registered, I would consider, or I would recommend that you go ahead and do that.
Great. Thanks. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done it unintentionally so that you can't really see the comments at the side. Let me just see if I can make this any sense. There are you can't see them now. I can see them on my screen, but they're you know, Tina from Missouri and Tom from Mississippi saying, I'm loving watching this, and you know, somebody else from Toronto, I'll be back tomorrow, and all of that. It obviously worked during COVID when people were really at home doing this, but they're still getting similar traction. So this is just one of the farms, and just to show you, you can see straight away that it's on a phone. It's not full screen, it's not edited, and it's live. So just, I hope you can hear it okay. Now, can you hear anything? Okay. What she's doing, that's the farmer saying, here's our farm. You can hear all the bleats and the moos and the noise of the farm as she's going. She's saying, you know, here's where the moms are, here's where some of the babies are. These are the babies whose mom didn't love them, basically, or else the mom didn't have enough milk, or the mom died. This is my daughter, she's feeding them. And they go through, this guy is called Huey the lamb, he's a pet, but we've Trevor the calf over there, and it's just that his mom didn't love him, da-de-da. So the story is, now she goes on for 30 minutes like that. You can see there's no editing and it's not sophisticated, but there was huge traction. You could do that in your kitchen, you could do that in your retail shop, you could do that for 30 seconds rather than 30 minutes, and it is going to engage people. And I would be saying it's something you can do over the winter. And if you get a chance to do any of those video editing course, or make a video on my phone, or all the wonderful training that is available out there, it's a wonderful way to spend your time, because the more authentic the better. Yes, you do want the beautifully produced videos and material, but you also want the really authentic. They want a sense of you, a sense of where you are. And I think it's going to be important. We're obviously on a pause now, but we're building up for when tourism is going to come back again, particularly the overseas visitor. There are people who are watching now who that will be the first thing on their list, you know, when they come back. They have a couple of 100 farms around Scotland that have been doing that, and they're all just like that. They're all just like that, and they're getting the same kind of view all the time. You could do a
can I say something? Just on a couple of points there. Farm stops are just my love. My very first tour was called Coast and Country, and it revolved around a farm stop. And I'm now involved with Bank of Ireland Open Farm Weekend. So I project managed it for the first time this year. Now, last year we were able to hold a live event where a number of farms from across Northern Ireland were able to open up to the public. So about 16,000 people came to visit those farms last year. But this year, because of COVID, we couldn't do a live event, so we had to run a virtual event. And very similar to what you're showing there, we had farm films from each of our participating farms, and we had 3 days of live events. People like Catherine at Longmeadow is one of our host farms, and they just do such fantastic work for this event. But taking it online this year meant that obviously we were able to really extend our reach and engagement. So across the 3 live days of the virtual farm weekend this year, we reached nearly 250,000 people, wow, which we just could not believe. You know, we knew the reach was going to be bigger, but we did not anticipate it was going to be at that level. And apart from, you know, the customers really, or the viewers really, really loving hearing the farm story and seeing right to the source of that food, what's also really important is they got to understand more about what farmers are doing in terms of looking after the environment, and even the fact that they are custodians of our countryside. Because again, you know, a lot of people don't realize, and I think you're spot on. I think sometimes we neglect to realize what's really important and what our visitors want to know. And certainly being able to tell the story about, you know, our environmental side of things, about, you know, biodiversity and all of that, it really does engage visitors, and it's something that they want to be aware of. So, I mean, I will always be really, really supportive of showcasing our amazing farms. And I would say to anyone who's got a farm or who's thinking of diversifying, never ever be scared to give something a try. The amount of interest that people have in farms, in farming, in where our fantastic food is produced is absolutely huge. Huge.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. I'm sure if we were in a real life conference, we'd have given you a round of applause at that statistic of the reach you had on that. So well done. But and the farm experience is not just for the farm. I'm going to touch on a little bit of that now. It's like that story can be told all over and across your whole I'm going to call you a chain because that's where I'm coming to now. I'm going to go back to the slide. Thanks, Wendy, for that. Connecting food and drink experiences. And we're really going to speak about this next week, but I just kind of wanted to introduce it this week. I think organically in our conversation here, you're already connecting. You're already seeing big opportunities. I think the chat is fascinating there right now. And as we've both said before, that's just the start really of the journey. Tracy, I know I'll bring you in towards the end of that. That was to remind me because I wanted to ask you a question. I know you're involved in a cluster. That's where we first met. It might actually have been my first time that I was in Northern Ireland, but what can come out of being connected in a group? I might bring that to Tracy or anybody else who's interested as well. But I call this the storytelling chain, like telling the story that happens on the farm. The root of food and drink tourism is food and drink of your place, and also the people of the place. So there may be food that's not of your place, but people there are doing something particular with it. And that can be just a chef's method, that can be the recipe you use, it can be the craft you use, but there's a story behind it all. And this is kind of one of the pictures I use. These are not all of the same place, but they're, one day I'm going to get pictures that are all of the same place that where this happens. But literally the tide to table, the farm to fork story, that if I'm a visitor, the nirvana on this really is if I could possibly and potentially meet a farmer, a fisherman, a grower, have an experience just by virtue of the conversation, or even more, a packaged experience where I can buy an experience or a tour or a visit or something like that. That's really that's unbelievable for large amounts of people who have never been at the source of their food, who didn't grow up near or on a farm, who didn't grow up near or on the sea, who they and their parents and their parents have lived in cities, for example. One of the big, I think COVID might change this a little bit, but one of the big mega trends we've had has been this move towards urbanization, and the prediction was by 2030 that 70% of the world's population was going to live in cities, in what we know is an inherently unhealthy environment, and that 95% of the time of people, not just in cities, also us in the country, is spent indoors. And that opportunity to be out, that window, that empowerment is really huge. So meeting somebody at the source of food, if you've never had that opportunity, is mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing. It's like, it's like me getting to ride my own camel in the Sahara, because that's so different for me. But for other people, it's that level of difference. The next picture there is the guy with the fish in the market. I mentioned it already. Events, festivals, foods, markets for food and drink tourism are so important, because again, it's that point of interaction. So if I was able to follow that chain along, I needn't meet them all in their farm. I could meet them in a place like that, but that primary point of food and drink production is really important. Then on to a festival. That's an event. We know in tourism they can be real hooks. People will come for the event, but having the reputation for the event puts your destination on the map as well. And finally, really the holy grail, that's showing up again in a restaurant. If I sit down that evening, or if I stop and have lunch, that I'm able to see my food travel through that. One that I'm aware of, maybe it's because it's local to me, but I think they have a national profile here in Ireland, here in the south for sure, is the St. Tola goat's cheese, which is a goat farm. I saw Goat Yoga there in a comment. I'm intrigued to know about that. But they have a goat farm from which they produce goat cheese. It's an award-winning cheese. It's, all kinds of accolades behind it. There's different versions of it, different levels, etc. They had a sign up on the country. They live in a real back road, country road. They had a sign up on the mainish road that leads to that, really for deliveries. They put up St. Tola goat's cheese just for deliveries because they kept getting lost. But what was happening, they had done such a good job in building their relationship with restaurants that restaurants tended to put St. Tola goat's cheese. They tended to name it on their menus. And what happened with the sign is somebody had eaten the food, eaten St. Tola in a restaurant somewhere. They drove past and saw the sign and said, oh Lord, look, that's the place, let's go up, thinking it was an invitation to visitors. And they found that they were having visitors wandering into their farm, which they were in no way set up to accommodate. Obviously, it was a working farm and there was all kinds of health and safety and all the rest. So they ended up creating this this area here in the farmyard that was called an Economusée, and there's a little interpretation centre in there and a little retail shop where they could actually host visitors safely. And they do a tour once a week at a set time as well. But it was from visitors knocking on their door as a result of seeing it on menus. And then in the experience that's once a week, people can come and touch, hold the kids, meet the goats, walk around the farm, be in the shed and taste the cheese. And that's kind of that whole idea of, we were saying, from delivering a service to moving towards empowerment of visitors. Look how happy that lady is with the goat. But this is the same cheese then. You will find this cheese really in most restaurants around County Clare, because it is local and because this particular business put so much effort into getting their brand on the menu. And I think that's the whole chain for a visitor. If they can follow that all the way, and even if they don't follow every step, the idea that they could, or that if they're in a restaurant and they say, oh, St. Tola, where's that the person they ask knows, that the person they ask knows that actually, you won't get the tour today because it's Wednesdays, but you could still pop in and buy something. They literally know that kind of stuff is really important. That's what really elevates you in terms of being a food destination. That's the Burren Food Trail, the group I mentioned. Again, I'd love a photo of this group if we had it, but that brings it to life for people. It's really all about people, and you identified that very early on. I've labored that point enough. The photos are important, the videos are important, so I would be looking for that for you, and particularly next week when we talk about how can we connect. It may be that there's 10 of you have a really good connection on a product that could create a lot of visibility. It may be the product, it may be the location, it may be the geography, whatever it is. There are ways that you can start to tell and show that story, as indeed Taste Causeway have done and are doing at the moment as well. I think you were finalists in the Foodie Destination of Ireland, is that right? Last year. So I often think about it like a box of chocolates. I'm flagging that you're back next week, and we're moving into this idea of, how can we elevate the story collectively? How can you build on your individual brilliance, and how can they be connected? And I know that's something that T and I are interested in as well, but it's more importantly something the visitor is interested in. Is this idea that, individually you're like a perfectly formed little chocolate, that's really appealing, really interesting, well crafted, well brought together. People are attracted towards it, but it's still, it's fine, it's beautiful, it's perfect. But in tourism terms, this is much more appealing. The idea that there's lots of you that are well-formed, beautiful, perfect, appealing, engaging, and that there's variety and diversity. And you mentioned variety there in the mind map as well, that diversity and that proximity to each other. This is where you really step change your proposition as a destination. The idea that as a visitor that you can cut through to me for food and drink above other destinations, or at least as well as other destinations, and that there's enough there for me to actually consider booking on the basis of that. And we have seen this happen with food and drink tourism. 4 years ago, you would have been saying that, and it would have been an elevation at that point, that it not that it was a decider for a holiday, but it was an enhancer. 4 years before that, it was kind of not really on the radar for Ireland. Then it was an enhancer. In many cases now, it's a decider. Like I said, I was doing research this morning with the bank about spending trends. What are people doing at the moment? And food and drink is where there's a huge amount of spend at the moment. There's people are spending less often, but when they spend, they're spending more. It is the treat thing. They are prepared to pay for quality, but less frequently. So it becomes a real treat. And that's, I suppose, I'm leaving you with that image as a picture of what it is you potentially are together. A destination is like a box of chocolates. I could have each of you in there. It's like a box of chocolates. It has appeal as an overall thing. I won't eat all the chocolates in there, because they don't all appeal to me, but I can pick the ones I like. And if you don't put them in a box together like that, if you said to me, like with a box of chocolates, you know, there's 20 chocolates all around the house, go on away there and find them, pick the ones you like and head off around the house. That's the same as you being out there individually to each other. But if you put it all in a box together, you go, ooh, look at that. Wow, you're totally pulled into it. But you go, yeah, I like those 3 or 4. Somebody else likes a different 3 or 4. And you can start to tell your story for the different segments. And it's just a nice way to think of yourselves. You can exist individually brilliantly, and you can exist together even more brilliantly. And then you put in on top of that an activity provider or an accommodation provider, or you know, all the other wonderful experiences, you know, a museum experience, and your box of chocolates is just getting bigger and more appealing the more connected you are. So that's my parting thought. I've been talking for a long time. It's 10 to 5 now. I know you have more to say. There are next steps. I'm going to let Gary, you know, fill you in on that. I think you're taking from me that if you could really look at your own experience and engaging with TNI on that and going through some of those checklists, and then coming back next week with ideas for how you might connect or collaborate better. I don't mean better, actually, that sounds really judgmental. I just mean connect or collaborate with the opportunities that are definitely coming up from this conversation today. That's where we'll be picking up next week. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, and I'm going to, and thank you for all the engagement and all the chat and all the participation there. That's really brilliant. It's made it a lot richer than if you hadn't. So I really do appreciate that in this particular forum, and I'll hand you back to Gary. Thanks very much.
Tina, thank you very much. That is a great session, and not only have I been scribbling bits and pieces down, but I see everyone else doing the same. And you know, I think we would all agree that we've all got our own takeaways, and we've all got little things that we want to think about as we move forward into the regional workshops next week. So and really, just to summarize from our part, this was the introduction into sort of food tourism and standalone and individual experiences, which is great and is what we need. But as we move forward into the interactive sessions, then next week we will be sort of split regionally by counties. That is really just to try and create some discussions in and around, well, if we did want to take the next step and either come together to create an experience, or is there somebody here in the virtual sort of room that can help me build upon my experience to give me standout? And going back to Tina's analogy there, you know, with the chocolate on its own is great, but you know, this chocolate box, this presentation that's together, that you have this selection, we want to start connecting to give a little bit of standout and destination appeal. So the regional sessions for next week, please, 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 I would love for you all to return and to commit to seeing part 2 of the session through. Have a read at the toolkit. Take a stab at the Embrace a Giant Spirit experience brand template. Not a fully thought out, realized experience, but some ideas. Maybe you've been inspired by some of the producers on the call, some of the experience providers on the call. So start to populate that in terms of what it looks like and what that offer is and how it might appeal to visitors. And then Tina will take us through that workshop at a very regional level next week. And we'll see what comes out of that in terms of starting our development journey together. So I'm really excited. We've seen lots of buzz and energy in the chat. People want details of who's on the call, and we can do that. If anyone has any objections, please let us know, and we can remove you from that. So, you know, the information that we'll send out to you probably this evening or tomorrow, do take some time to digest it. Do take some time to, you know, think about Tina's delivery and really reflecting on the sense of place, the pride. I think we all noted earlier how proud we were, not only of Northern Ireland, of the producers, of the great experiences that we have. So carry that away with you and bring it to the workshop next week as my app.